The mechanic lived a simple life. His house was small, just enough for one person, and it sat on the edge of a quiet, dusty town where people kept to themselves. Every morning, he woke up before the sun, brewed a cup of strong tea, and went straight to his little workshop. The smell of oil and metal surrounded him like an old friend. He fixed engines, repaired broken machines, and sometimes built little gadgets for neighbors who could afford to pay. Life was hard, but he had learned to live with it. Every day was the same: work, eat, sleep, and start over. There was nothing extraordinary about his life, and he had long accepted that one morning a letter arrived. It was sealed in thick, strange paper with an unfamiliar emblem. The mechanic frowned. Letters were rare in his town, and this one felt heavier than usual. The handwriting was elegant and careful, almost as if it belonged to someone important. Curious, he opened it. As he read, his eyebrows rose higher and higher. The letter explained that he had inherited something very unusual from a distant relative he had never met. It was not money, not land, not a house. It was a creature, described as an alien dragon. The mechanic laughed nervously. An alien dragon? That had to be a joke. People played tricks on him sometimes, knowing he lived alone and kept mostly to himself. But the letter was official. It had instructions, a small map, and the warning: handle with care. It is unlike anything on Earth. That evening, he followed the map. It led him to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the town. The building had broken windows, rusted metal doors, and an air of mystery that made his heart race. With cautious steps, he pushed the doors open. Inside, he saw a small cage, and inside that cage was the most incredible, terrifying, and confusing creature he had ever seen. The dragon was not beautiful. Its scales were a dull gray with patches of green and purple, and it had eyes that seemed to glare at him with a mix of anger and boredom. Its wings were folded awkwardly, and it hissed softly as he approached. It was grumpy, messy, and made strange sounds that reminded him of metal scraping against stone. The mechanic swallowed hard. He had inherited an alien dragon, and it was even uglier than the letter had described. He hesitated. What was he supposed to do? Take it home? Feed it? What did an alien dragon even eat? He had never imagined a situation like this. He felt fear, excitement, and a strange responsibility all at once. After a long pause, he decided to follow the instructions in the letter. He carefully opened the cage, and the dragon let out a low growl, shaking its head as if to say, "I don't trust you." The journey home was chaotic. The dragon was heavier than he expected. Every bump in the road made it roar in frustration. It snapped at low-hanging branches and banged against the sides of the cart. People who saw him stared, whispered, and quickly moved away. Some even ran in fear. The mechanic ignored them. He had a job to do, and the dragon, as much as he hated to admit it, needed him. When they reached the workshop, he had to find a place for the dragon to stay. It was impossible to put it in his tiny house, so he cleared a corner of the workshop. He built a small enclosure, hoping it would be enough to contain the creature. The dragon glared at him from the corner, still hissing softly. It was clear this would not be easy. Days passed, and the mechanic quickly realized how difficult it would be to care for the dragon. It made strange noises that kept him awake at night. It knocked over tools, broke parts he had spent hours repairing, and sometimes sneezed a thick green mist that ruined his workbench. The townspeople whispered about the strange creature living in the mechanic's workshop. Some thought he had lost his mind. Others warned him to get rid of it before it caused serious trouble. Despite all this, the mechanic began to notice small things. The dragon was clever. It understood when he fed it and when he spoke kindly. Sometimes it would watch him work, tilting its head as if studying every movement. There were moments, brief and rare, when it would nuzzle his shoulder or let out a soft purr-like sound. Those moments felt like tiny victories, reminders that he was not completely alone. The mechanic's life began to change in unexpected ways. He had less time for himself because the dragon needed constant attention. He spent hours trying to understand its behavior, figuring out what it liked and disliked, and keeping it from destroying everything he owned. It was exhausting, frustrating work, but it also brought a strange sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, he felt needed. One evening, as he sat repairing a small engine, the dragon suddenly shifted closer. Its eyes, usually filled with suspicion, seemed almost curious. It sniffed at the engine, then tapped it with one claw. The mechanic laughed softly. "You're more trouble than 100 machines," he said, shaking his head. The dragon let out a low rumble, almost like it was laughing too. For a moment, the chaos of their life together felt like friendship. But there were challenges still. The dragon's grumpiness could flare up at any time. A wrong movement, a loud noise, or even a shadow passing by could make it roar or swipe its tail. The mechanic learned quickly that patience was the only way to survive. He could not force the dragon to behave. He could not yell or get angry. He had to be calm, steady, and gentle. Even when it was the hardest thing in the world, the townspeople began to notice subtle changes as well. Some grew curious, others stayed distant. Children whispered about the alien creature, daring each other to peek into the workshop. The mechanic found himself explaining less and simply showing small glimpses. The dragon helping him carry parts, watching over the workshop, or sitting quietly as he worked. Slowly, people began to accept the strange presence. Though wariness remained at night, the mechanic often sat alone with the dragon. He would tell it about his life, about the small joys and worries of being a human living in a quiet town. The dragon, in its own way, seemed to listen. It would rest its head near him, and the mechanic began to feel a strange bond forming. He realized that this grumpy, ugly, alien creature was not just an inheritance. It was a companion. Someone or something he could rely on, just as it relied on him. He thought about the letter, about the mysterious relative who had sent the dragon to him. Perhaps this was more than chance. Perhaps this was destiny, strange and unpredictable, bringing him a companion who would change his life. He did not yet know how or when, but a small spark of hope grew inside him. The dragon was more than a burden. It was a beginning, a story waiting to unfold by the end of the first week. The mechanic could feed the dragon without incident. He could clean the enclosure, repair what it broke, and even get a small nuzzle in return. He knew there would be difficult days ahead. There would be accidents, misunderstandings, and moments of fear. But for the first time in a long while, he felt alive in a way he never had before. The world outside might not understand the strange partnership, but inside the workshop, among the oil and metal and strange alien presence, the mechanic felt something remarkable: hope, connection, and the first flicker of adventure. And though the dragon remained grumpy and ugly, the mechanic knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. Life for the mechanic had changed completely. The days were no longer quiet or predictable. The grumpy alien dragon had settled into the workshop in its own stubborn way, and the mechanic had learned that caring for it was a full-time challenge. Every morning began with checking on the dragon, making sure it was fed and comfortable, and carefully inspecting the workshop for anything it might have damaged overnight. The creature was clever, more intelligent than any human had imagined, but it was unpredictable. Some days it would cooperate, even help him with small tasks, and other days it would lash out at the slightest sound, knocking over tools or growling fiercely. At first, the mechanic felt overwhelmed. He had never dealt with anything like this. Machines were predictable. Engines didn't hiss, bite, or demand attention. But the dragon was alive in a way that no machine could ever be. It was like living with a wild storm, beautiful, chaotic, and impossible to control. Despite the exhaustion, he felt a strange excitement. There was a life in the workshop now that had never existed before, a heartbeat that was not his own. The first few weeks were the hardest. The dragon had no interest in learning human routines. It refused to stay in one place for more than a few hours, often wandering across the town when the mechanic accidentally left the door open. Neighbors complained. They whispered about the creature with fear and curiosity. Some claimed it was dangerous. Others were fascinated. The mechanic ignored the gossip. He knew he had a responsibility, and he could not abandon the dragon simply because it was difficult. Feeding the dragon was a constant puzzle. Nothing the mechanic offered seemed right at first. The letter had included some vague instructions about alien sustenance, but the ingredients were nearly impossible to find. He experimented with various foods, carefully observing the dragon's reactions. Some made it roar in anger, others caused it to sulk in a corner for hours. Slowly, through trial and error, he found what it liked: a mix of local meat, certain plants, and even small metal scraps it seemed to chew on thoughtfully. It was strange, yes, but it worked. The dragon began to eat more regularly, and in return, it started showing small signs of trust. Trust was the hardest thing to earn. The dragon's grumpiness was not just for show. It was wary of humans, wary of the world, and wary of anyone trying to control it. Sometimes when the mechanic approached, it would hiss and swipe its tail, sending tools and scraps flying. Other times, it would watch quietly from a distance, studying him as if deciding whether he was worthy of its attention. The mechanic learned to be patient, to move slowly, to speak softly, and to understand its moods. He realized that yelling or forcing it into submission only made things worse. The dragon respected gentleness and calmness. The bond between them grew in small ways. The mechanic would spend hours repairing engines, while the dragon watched, its head tilted and eyes curious. Occasionally, it would reach out with a claw, tapping the tool he was holding or nudging a part in place. The first time it did this, the mechanic laughed in disbelief. The dragon, though grumpy and ugly, was learning to help in its own peculiar way. It was not friendship yet, not entirely, but it was progress. It was a beginning. Still, the challenges were many. One afternoon, the dragon became unusually restless. It stomped around the workshop, knocking over boxes and scattering papers. The mechanic tried to calm it, speaking gently and offering food, but nothing worked. For hours, it paced back and forth, growling under its breath. The mechanic felt his patience stretch thin. He wanted to shout, to demand order, but he knew that would only make things worse. Instead, he took a deep breath, stepped back, and let the dragon have its space. Slowly, after what felt like an eternity, the creature settled down, curling into a corner and letting out a low rumble. The mechanic realized then that sometimes caring meant waiting, even when it was frustrating. Outside the workshop, life in the town continued. The mechanic noticed people began to watch him differently. Some were curious, sneaking glances at the strange creature through broken windows. Others avoided him, muttering that he had gone mad. Children, especially, were fascinated. They dared each other to peek inside, laughing and gasping at the sight of the grumpy alien dragon. The mechanic did not mind their curiosity. In fact, he sometimes allowed them to see small glimpses, careful not to let the dragon feel threatened. Over time, the townspeople's fear began to soften, replaced by curiosity and, eventually, respect. At night, the mechanic often found himself talking to the dragon. He spoke about simple things: his day, small frustrations, his dreams. The dragon would sit quietly, sometimes leaning its head closer as if listening. There were moments when the mechanic would catch it staring at him with what almost looked like understanding. It was strange to think that this alien creature, so far from anything he had known, could connect with him on some level. But the feeling was real, undeniable, and comforting. One rainy evening, a heavy storm struck the town. Lightning flashed across the sky, and thunder shook the small workshop. The dragon panicked. It roared and thrashed, knocking over a stack of metal sheets. The mechanic rushed to calm it, covering it with a tarp to protect it from the cold rain and speaking softly, reassuringly. Hours passed, and the storm finally subsided. Exhausted, soaked, and battered, the mechanic and the dragon sat in silence. The mechanic realized that the dragon trusted him enough to allow him close, even in fear. That small trust felt like victory. Days turned into weeks, and the mechanic began to notice more subtle changes. The dragon, while still grumpy, began to follow him around the workshop more willingly. It started staying near him instead of wandering off. Sometimes, when he fixed a machine, the dragon would nudge a tool toward him or help carry a small part. Its eyes, once filled with suspicion, now showed flickers of curiosity and recognition. The mechanic felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had not just inherited a creature. He had begun to earn its respect. Still, life was not without dangers. The dragon's size and strength made accidents inevitable. One morning, while the mechanic was repairing a generator, the dragon accidentally knocked over a large barrel, crushing several important tools. The mechanic sighed deeply, not angry but tired. He realized that caring for this creature meant accepting chaos as part of life. Nothing in his old world of machines could have prepared him for this. And yet he would not trade it. Each challenge, each accident, each roar of frustration from the dragon was a reminder that life had changed. And in some strange way, for the better. One evening, the mechanic decided to take a break from the workshop. He and the dragon sat outside, looking at the stars. The creature, usually restless at night, remained calm. It rested its head on the mechanic's lap, and for a moment, everything felt peaceful. The mechanic thought about how far they had come. A grumpy, ugly alien dragon had become not just a responsibility, but a companion. He could not explain how or why this happened, but he felt a connection deeper than words. The townspeople began to notice these changes as well. The dragon, once feared and avoided, became a subject of fascination and even admiration. They saw glimpses of its intelligence, its strength, and most importantly, its growing bond with the mechanic. Some of the more curious neighbors came to watch, quietly and respectfully, as the mechanic worked alongside his unusual companion. Slowly, fear was replaced by a cautious kind of wonder. By the end of the second month, the mechanic realized something important. The dragon had changed him as much as he had changed it. He was more patient, more thoughtful, and more aware of the needs of another living being. He had learned to communicate without words, to understand gestures, moods, and subtle signs. The dragon had taught him lessons that no machine ever could, and yet the adventure was just beginning. The dragon's abilities hinted at possibilities the mechanic had not yet imagined. Sometimes it would perform small feats that seemed impossible, moving heavy objects with ease, reacting to danger before it appeared, or showing a strange awareness of the world around it. The mechanic felt a spark of excitement. He did not know what the future held, but he knew that with the dragon by his side, life would never be ordinary again. The bond between them deepened each day. The mechanic had learned that caring for the dragon was not just about feeding it or keeping it safe. It was about understanding it, respecting it, and growing alongside it. In return, the dragon had begun to trust, to learn, and to show signs of affection in its own peculiar way. Their lives were messy, challenging, and unpredictable, but they were alive, truly alive, in a way neither had ever experienced before. By the end of part 2, the mechanic had accepted that his life would never return to its old quiet rhythm. The grumpy alien dragon was no longer just a burden or a mystery. It had become a partner, a teacher, and a companion in a world that suddenly seemed full of possibilities, danger, and wonder. And the mechanic, once alone and struggling, had discovered that sometimes the most incredible changes come from the most unexpected places. Life in the workshop had settled into a rhythm, but the mechanic knew something was changing. The dragon was no longer just a grumpy, clumsy creature. It was becoming more aware, sharper, and stronger in ways he could not fully understand. One morning, while repairing an old engine, he noticed the dragon moving pieces of metal with its claws, not by touching them, but seemingly by will. The mechanic froze. He rubbed his eyes, thinking he was imagining things. But when he looked again, the small metal rod had shifted slightly toward him. Curiosity mixed with fear. Could the dragon actually manipulate objects without touching them? He decided to test it. He placed a small wrench on the table and stepped back. Slowly, the wrench rolled toward the dragon. The mechanic's heart raced. This was no ordinary creature. This was something extraordinary, something far beyond his understanding. Over the next few days, the mechanic observed the dragon closely. Its abilities were subtle at first. It could sense danger before it happened, ducking just before a falling shelf crashed to the floor or nudging him away from a hot engine part before he got burned. The dragon seemed to understand more than he had ever imagined. It was not just intelligent. It was aware of the world in ways he could not explain. The mechanic felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He realized he had inherited not just a strange companion, but a creature with powers that could be dangerous if uncontrolled. He began to take careful notes, observing patterns in its behavior, trying to understand its limits. Some days, it would show nothing unusual, acting like the same grumpy, stubborn creature as before. Other days, it displayed feats that made him catch his breath and take a step back in amazement. One afternoon, a small fire started in the workshop. A spark from a faulty wire landed on a pile of rags, and flames began to spread quickly. Panic rose in the mechanic's chest. Before he could grab the extinguisher, the dragon leapt toward the fire. Its claws glowed faintly, and with a wave of its tail, the flames seemed to shrink and vanish. Smoke lingered, but the fire was gone. The mechanic stared in disbelief. He had just witnessed something miraculous. The dragon could not only move objects, but control elements in ways that defied logic. The realization filled him with both fear and hope. Fear, because such power could be dangerous if uncontrolled. Hope, because this creature could do things no human could. He began to experiment carefully, trying to understand how the dragon's abilities worked. He noticed that it responded to his calm voice and steady hands. When he grew anxious or frustrated, the dragon became unpredictable. But when he was patient, focused, and gentle, the dragon's abilities seemed to flow more naturally, as if it trusted him to guide its actions. The dragon itself seemed to enjoy these moments. It would growl softly in concentration, its eyes focused, its body still. The mechanic could feel the energy in the workshop shift. It was almost like working with a living, thinking force. He realized that their partnership was becoming deeper, more intertwined. The dragon relied on him as much as he relied on it. Word began to spread quietly in the town about the strange happenings in the mechanic's workshop. People reported seeing unusual lights, hearing low roars, and glimpsing something moving in impossible ways. Some whispered that the mechanic had gone mad. Others wondered if he had discovered some new kind of science. The mechanic paid little attention. He knew that what mattered most was understanding the dragon, keeping it safe, and learning how to work with it. One day, a particularly strong windstorm swept through the town. Trees bent, roofs rattled, and debris flew through the streets. The mechanic worried about his workshop, but when he looked outside, he saw the dragon standing at the entrance, wings spread, tail raised. With a deep roar, it released a strange wave of energy that pushed the debris away from the building. The mechanic watched, amazed and relieved, realizing that the dragon had saved the workshop without any hesitation. The event marked a turning point. The mechanic began to see the dragon not just as a companion, but as a protector. Its grumpiness and stubbornness were gone in these moments, replaced by focus, intelligence, and power. Yet the dragon still had its moods, its quirks, and its occasional bursts of frustration. It was not perfect, but it was incredible. The mechanic started to feel a sense of pride. He had been entrusted with this being, and he was learning to guide it, teach it, and understand it. It was a partnership, unlike anything he had ever known. He spent hours observing, testing, and experimenting, always careful not to push the dragon too far or provoke it. Sometimes he would hold out his hands and ask it to move objects, focusing his own energy on calmness and patience. The dragon responded, slowly at first, then with growing confidence. It was during one of these quiet practice sessions that the mechanic noticed something new. The dragon seemed to have an instinct for understanding human emotions. When he felt nervous or doubtful, it would approach him, nuzzle his shoulder, or let out a soft rumble as if to reassure him. When he felt angry or frustrated, it would retreat, sulking in a corner until he calmed down. He realized that the dragon was not just intelligent. It was empathetic, capable of sensing feelings and responding in kind. This realization changed the way he approached their partnership. He stopped seeing the dragon as a challenge or a responsibility. Instead, he began to see it as a teammate, a partner who could think, feel, and act in ways that complemented his own abilities. Together, they could achieve things neither could do alone. The mechanic felt a new sense of purpose, a spark of hope that had been missing in his life for years. Yet, with power came caution. The mechanic knew that the dragon's abilities could attract attention, and not all attention would be kind. He worried that outsiders might try to take the creature, exploit it, or use it for their own gain. He became protective, careful about who he allowed near the workshop. He realized that keeping the dragon safe was not just about feeding it or caring for it. It was about keeping it away from those who might harm it. Despite the challenges, there were moments of pure wonder. The mechanic remembered one evening when he was repairing a broken generator. The dragon, curious as always, approached. Without touching the machine, it tilted its head, concentrated, and moved a small gear into place with a subtle wave of energy. The generator hummed to life. The mechanic laughed in disbelief, amazed at what had just happened. He realized that with the dragon by his side, there were no limits to what they could accomplish. Life began to feel larger, more exciting, and more unpredictable. Every day brought new discoveries, new lessons, and new challenges. The dragon's abilities continued to grow, and with them, the mechanic's understanding and confidence also increased. He learned patience, focus, empathy, and the importance of trust. In turn, the dragon learned to listen, to respond, and to act with purpose. By the end of Part 3, the mechanic understood that his life had changed forever. The dragon was no longer just a grumpy, ugly creature. It was powerful, intelligent, and deeply connected to him. Together, they were a team capable of facing challenges and overcoming obstacles that no human or creature could manage alone. The workshop, once a place of quiet routine, had become a center of wonder, learning, and growth. And for the first time in years, the mechanic felt that his life was full of potential, excitement, and something truly extraordinary. He knew that more challenges awaited, but he also knew one thing. With the dragon by his side, he could face anything. The mechanic had grown used to the dragon's presence, its quirks, and even its occasional outbursts. But life was about to test them in a way neither of them had expected. One afternoon, while the mechanic was fixing a broken water pump at the edge of town, he noticed a crowd gathering nearby. People were shouting, pointing, and running in panic. He felt a chill run down his spine. Something serious was happening, as he approached, he saw the cause. A large section of the town's main bridge had collapsed, trapping people on both sides of the river. The water was rising quickly after recent rains, and anyone caught on the crumbling bridge was in danger. The mechanic's heart pounded. He had never faced a disaster like this. He looked toward the dragon, who had followed him quietly. Its usual grumpy expression was replaced with something sharper, alert, almost tense. The dragon sensed the danger immediately. Without hesitation, the mechanic and the dragon moved toward the bridge. The mechanic knew he could not save everyone on his own. He had his hands full, just navigating the slippery banks and the rising water. But the dragon, with its size, strength, and growing abilities, could make a real difference. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself, and whispered to the dragon, "We need to help them. Are you ready?" The dragon tilted its head, letting out a low growl that sounded almost like an answer. Then, with a sudden burst of energy, it leapt onto the broken bridge. Its claws gripped the wood and stone, and it carefully made its way toward the trapped people. The mechanic followed closely behind, offering guidance and calling out instructions. The dragon moved cautiously but decisively, using its tail to stabilize crumbling sections and its strength to shift heavy beams blocking the path. People stared in awe and fear. They had heard rumors about the dragon, but no one had imagined it could be capable of this. Children clung to their parents, wide-eyed, while adults tried to stay out of the way. The mechanic ignored the stares. He focused entirely on coordinating with the dragon, guiding it to where people were in the most danger. The rescue was not easy. Some sections of the bridge were too unstable, collapsing under the dragon's weight despite its careful movements. The mechanic shouted warnings, and the dragon adjusted instantly, using its tail and claws to support loose planks and steady frightened people. Each successful save brought a surge of relief, but also a renewed sense of urgency. Time was running out, and the water kept rising. At one point, a small child slipped into the river, crying for help. Without hesitation, the dragon leapt into the water, its powerful limbs cutting through the currents. It scooped the child onto its back, holding them securely while the mechanic guided them to the riverbank. When they were safe, the mechanic hugged the child tightly and looked at the dragon with awe. Its eyes were calm now, focused and protective. For the first time, the townspeople saw the dragon not as a grumpy, ugly creature, but as a hero. The mechanic realized that this moment would change everything. Their partnership, forged through weeks of patience and understanding, was proving its worth. The dragon's abilities, once mysterious and unpredictable, were now being directed with purpose. The mechanic had learned how to communicate with it, guide it, and help it focus. In turn, the dragon trusted him to make the right decisions. Even in the most dangerous situations. As the rescue continued, the mechanic noticed something else. The dragon seemed to anticipate danger before it appeared. When a section of the bridge threatened to collapse, it shifted instinctively, nudging people out of the way and bracing the wood with its claws. It was as if it could sense the structural weaknesses in the bridge, predicting the failures before they happened. The mechanic felt a mixture of fear and pride. This creature, which he had inherited and barely understood, was saving lives with intelligence and courage beyond anything he had ever seen. The storm clouds above grew darker, and rain began to fall again, making the bridge even more treacherous. The mechanic's clothes were soaked, his hands slippery from the wet metal, but he did not falter. He called out to the dragon, directing it toward the last group of trapped people. The dragon moved with careful precision, using its tail to balance itself and its claws to clear debris. Slowly, one by one, they were guided to safety. Finally, the last person was rescued, a young woman holding her baby tightly. The dragon lowered its head, allowing the woman to climb onto solid ground. The mechanic breathed heavily, exhausted but relieved. He looked at the dragon, whose chest heaved as it caught its breath. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. They had faced danger together, and they had prevailed. The townspeople began to gather around, their fear replaced by awe and gratitude. They approached cautiously, unsure how to react to the creature that had saved so many lives. The mechanic stepped forward and spoke calmly, explaining that the dragon was not a threat, but a protector. Slowly, the crowd began to nod, some offering words of thanks. Children reached out tentatively, and the dragon, surprisingly gentle, allowed them to touch its scales. The grumpy, ugly alien dragon was now seen in a new light. Brave, intelligent, and capable of great kindness. After the rescue, the mechanic and the dragon returned to the workshop, both exhausted but filled with a sense of accomplishment. The workshop was quiet now, the storm having passed, and the mechanic took a moment to reflect. He realized how far they had come together. Weeks ago, the dragon had been a chaotic, unpredictable creature. Now it had proven itself as a partner, a protector, and a friend. He felt a deep sense of pride and connection, knowing that their bond had been tested in the most extreme way and had emerged stronger than ever in the following days. The town slowly returned to normal, but the memory of the rescue lingered. People spoke quietly about the dragon, their fear replaced by admiration. Some even sought the mechanic's advice on caring for strange or unusual creatures, though he politely declined, knowing that this dragon was unique. The mechanic focused instead on learning more about its abilities, observing it with careful attention. He knew that their journey was far from over. The dragon, for its part, seemed calmer after the event. Its usual grumpiness had softened, replaced by a quiet focus and responsiveness. It no longer lashed out at every little disturbance, but moved with purpose and awareness. The mechanic noticed small changes in its behavior, moments of curiosity, gestures of affection, and an increased attentiveness to his instructions. They were growing together, understanding each other in ways neither could have imagined before. Yet, the mechanic also knew that danger could return at any moment. The dragon's abilities, while incredible, were still largely a mystery. He could guide it, communicate with it, and help it focus, but there were limits to what he understood. He realized that their partnership required constant attention, patience, and trust. One wrong move, one moment of panic, could have dire consequences. Despite the risks, the mechanic felt a renewed sense of purpose. The dragon was no longer just a creature he had inherited. It was a companion, a protector, and a reminder that life could be extraordinary when approached with courage, patience, and care. He had learned to trust it, to guide it, and to work alongside it. In turn, the dragon had learned to trust him, follow his guidance, and respond to his presence with focus and loyalty. As the days passed, the mechanic and the dragon continued to train and explore their abilities together. They practiced moving objects, controlling energy, and responding to danger. The mechanic discovered that the dragon could sense danger before it happened, react to threats, and even anticipate human actions. This made them a powerful team, capable of facing challenges that no ordinary human or creature could manage alone. By the end of Part 4, the mechanic understood that their lives had changed forever. The dragon was no longer just a grumpy, ugly, alien creature. It was a partner, a protector, and a friend. Together, they had faced danger, saved lives, and discovered the true strength of their bond. The workshop, once a place of quiet routine, had become a center of learning, courage, and discovery. And the mechanic, once a simple, struggling man, had discovered that with patience, trust, and understanding, he could accomplish extraordinary things alongside his incredible companion. Life had started to settle into a new rhythm for the mechanic and the dragon, but they both sensed that their greatest challenge was approaching. One morning, the mechanic awoke to an urgent knock at the workshop door. A townsperson burst in, eyes wide with panic. "The river's dam is failing," they shouted. "If it breaks, the whole town will flood." The mechanic's heart raced. He knew immediately that this would be the test of all they had learned together. The dragon, sensing his fear and urgency, rose to its feet, wings stretching wide and tail flicking nervously. There was no hesitation. They had faced challenges before, but nothing of this scale. The water was rising quickly, and the townspeople were in real danger. The mechanic grabbed his tools and led the way, the dragon following close behind, ready for action. As they approached the dam, the scene was chaotic. Water poured over the edges, threatening to burst the walls entirely. People screamed and ran to higher ground. The mechanic felt a surge of responsibility and fear. He knew that without the dragon, many lives could be lost. But with it, there was hope. He took a deep breath and turned to his companion. "We can do this," he said softly. "We have to stop it, or at least buy time until help arrives." The dragon seemed to understand. It roared loudly, a deep, powerful sound that echoed across the valley, and leapt forward to assess the situation. Its eyes scanned the dam, moving swiftly, calculating the weakest points. The mechanic watched in awe. He had trained the dragon to follow instructions, to focus, and to respond to danger. But what he saw now went beyond anything he had imagined. It seemed almost like the dragon could think ahead, predicting the collapse before it happened. The first wave of water hit a weak section of the dam, cracking it further. The mechanic called out instructions, pointing to the section the dragon should stabilize. With incredible strength, the dragon used its claws to brace the crumbling wall and its tail to push against the pressure of the water. Small rocks shifted, creating temporary barriers. The mechanic worked alongside it, using his knowledge of mechanics and materials to reinforce the structure as best he could. People watched in disbelief. The grumpy, ugly alien dragon, once a source of fear and gossip, was now the town's protector. Its movements were precise, deliberate, and powerful. Every action seemed guided by instinct, but it was clear that the mechanic's guidance had a role as well. Together, they were a team, balancing each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. Minutes passed like hours. The dam creaked and groaned under the pressure, threatening to collapse entirely. The mechanic shouted instructions, moving with careful precision. The dragon shifted, nudging heavy debris into place, lifting fallen logs, and using its body to block rushing water. It was exhausting work for both of them, but neither faltered. They were determined to protect the town at all costs. Suddenly, a section of the dam gave way. A surge of water rushed forward, faster and stronger than before. The mechanic's heart leapt into his throat. He barely had time to react, but the dragon moved instantly, leaping into the rushing water, claws outstretched. It pushed against the current, blocking some of the force with its massive body. The mechanic ran alongside, guiding frightened townspeople to safety. He realized in that moment how much he had come to rely on the dragon. Its strength, intelligence, and instincts were unmatched. Without it, there would have been no chance. After what felt like an eternity, the immediate danger was over. The dam had partially collapsed, but the town had been saved from total disaster. The mechanic sank to his knees, exhausted and drenched, but relief washed over him. The dragon stood nearby, tail dragging in the mud, chest heaving as it caught its breath. Despite its grumpiness, its eyes seemed calmer, almost proud. It had done what it was meant to do: protect, guide, and save lives. In the following days, the town began to recover. People spoke quietly about the rescue, their fear of the dragon replaced by admiration and gratitude. The mechanic noticed a change in how they looked at him, too. Once a simple, struggling man, he was now seen as a leader, someone who could guide and protect alongside his extraordinary companion. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the hard work, patience, and understanding he had invested in the dragon had paid off in a way he could never have imagined. The dragon, too, seemed to change. Its grumpiness had softened further, replaced by a focused calmness. It followed the mechanic more willingly, responded more quickly to his instructions, and even began showing small signs of affection. Sometimes it would rest its head near him, nuzzle his hand, or make a low rumble of contentment. The mechanic had never imagined that an alien creature, so far from human understanding, could form such a bond. But here it was, alive, powerful, and connected to him in a way that felt almost human. The experience left the mechanic reflecting deeply on the nature of their partnership. He realized that their success had not come from strength alone, nor from intelligence alone, but from trust. He trusted the dragon to act wisely, to protect the town, and to follow guidance. The dragon trusted him to lead, to make decisions, and to remain calm under pressure. Together, they had created something far greater than the sum of their parts. A true partnership, forged in challenge, patience, and courage. In the quiet moments after the crisis, the mechanic and the dragon sat together outside the workshop. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the town. The mechanic ran his hand over the dragon's scales, feeling the rough texture and the power beneath. "We did it," he whispered, almost to himself. The dragon let out a soft rumble in response, resting its head against him. It was a simple moment, but it spoke volumes. They had survived, learned, and grown together. The townspeople, gradually regaining confidence, began to see the dragon differently. Some children approached carefully, touching its scales and asking questions. Adults nodded with quiet respect, realizing that the creature had saved lives in a way no human could have alone. The mechanic felt a sense of pride not in himself, but in their partnership. He had learned that caring for something, understanding it, and working together could create outcomes beyond imagination. Yet the mechanic knew that life would not always be so dramatic or heroic. There would be small challenges, frustrations, and daily struggles. But the bond he shared with the dragon had been tested under the greatest pressure, and it had survived. That knowledge gave him confidence. They could face anything together: danger, uncertainty, or even the unknown future. Over the next few weeks, the mechanic focused on strengthening their partnership further. He taught the dragon more about human tools, gestures, and routines. In turn, the dragon taught him about instinct, awareness, and patience in ways he had never imagined. Each day brought new lessons, small victories, and moments of connection. They were no longer just human and alien. They were companions, equals, and partners in every sense. The experience of the dam crisis left a lasting impression on the mechanic. He realized that life was not about avoiding danger or controlling every situation. It was about understanding, trust, and the willingness to face challenges with courage. The dragon, once a grumpy, ugly, and unpredictable creature, had become a teacher, a guide, and a friend. Together, they had learned that extraordinary outcomes often emerge from the most unexpected places. By the end of Part 5, the mechanic understood that both he and the dragon had transformed. He was no longer a struggling, uncertain man living a quiet life. He was a partner, a leader, and a caretaker of something extraordinary. The dragon, too, had grown not just in power and intelligence, but in trust, loyalty, and connection. Their journey was far from over, but they had proven that together they could face even the most impossible challenges. The mechanic looked at the dragon and smiled, a mixture of pride, gratitude, and hope filling his heart. The grumpy, ugly alien dragon was no longer just a burden or a mystery. It was a companion, a protector, and a reminder that life could be incredible when courage, patience, and understanding were combined. Together, they were unstoppable. After weeks of challenges, adventures, and growth, life for the mechanic and the dragon had reached a new level. The town had come to respect the dragon, no longer seeing it as a grumpy, ugly, frightening creature, but as a protector and companion. The mechanic, once a quiet, struggling man, had become someone people looked to with admiration and gratitude. Yet, both of them knew that their journey was far from over. Something inside the mechanic stirred, a feeling that a final, extraordinary test of their bond and abilities was approaching. One morning, as the sun rose and painted the sky with shades of gold, the mechanic noticed something strange. The dragon's behavior had changed subtly. It moved with an unusual sense of purpose, eyes scanning the horizon as if searching for something far away. Its tail flicked, and its wings twitched nervously. The mechanic followed its gaze and saw smoke rising in the distance. He recognized the shape of a fire, larger and more threatening than any they had faced before. Without hesitation, he called to the dragon. "We need to go. People might be in danger." The dragon responded instantly, stretching its wings and crouching low as if preparing for flight. The mechanic ran alongside it, heart pounding as they approached the source of the fire. When they arrived, the scene was terrifying. A section of the forest near the town had caught fire, and the flames were spreading rapidly toward homes. The heat was intense, and the smoke burned the eyes and throat. The mechanic felt a rush of fear, but quickly pushed it aside. He knew they could not hesitate. Lives were at stake. The dragon leapt forward, moving with precision and strength. Its claws scraped the earth, creating small trenches to slow the fire's advance. Its wings flapped powerfully, sending bursts of wind toward the flames, pushing them back just enough to protect those in immediate danger. The mechanic worked alongside it, using whatever tools he could find: buckets, hoses, and boards to reinforce their efforts. Together, they formed a team, combining human ingenuity with alien power in a way that amazed everyone watching as the fire spread. The townspeople began to gather at a safe distance. They watched in awe as the dragon moved fearlessly into the heart of the flames, extinguishing small patches and clearing debris. The mechanic shouted instructions, guiding the dragon to areas where people were most at risk. The bond they had developed over weeks of challenges and adventures was evident in every movement. The dragon anticipated his commands, responding instantly, almost as if they were thinking as one. The danger was immense. The fire threatened to jump to nearby houses, and the wind carried sparks unpredictably. At one point, a large tree, weakened by the flames, began to fall toward a group of children huddled together. The mechanic shouted a warning, but before he could move them, the dragon leapt, catching the trunk with its claws and body, stopping it from crushing anyone. The children gasped, eyes wide with awe and fear, and the mechanic felt a surge of pride. The dragon's strength, intelligence, and bravery were unmatched. Hours passed in this intense struggle. The mechanic and the dragon moved tirelessly, working together to protect lives and control the fire. The dragon's powers seemed to grow stronger with every challenge. It could sense danger before it happened, anticipate the movement of flames, and even stabilize weakened ground with its claws and tail. The mechanic marveled at the creature's abilities, realizing that this partnership was not just extraordinary, it was unique in the world. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the fire began to subside. The dragon, exhausted but steady, had helped prevent the disaster from reaching the town. The mechanic, drenched in sweat and soot, collapsed to his knees, overwhelmed by relief and gratitude. They had faced one of the greatest challenges of their lives and had come through it together. The townspeople approached cautiously, offering words of thanks and admiration. Children reached out to touch the dragon, and it lowered its head, allowing them to do so gently. The mechanic smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. In the following days, the town began to rebuild. The mechanic worked alongside neighbors, repairing damage and helping restore homes. The dragon, now fully trusted and accepted, assisted in ways that no human could. It carried heavy materials, cleared debris, and even helped protect the workers from any lingering dangers. People marveled at how a once grumpy, ugly alien dragon had become an essential part of their lives. They saw not just its strength, but its intelligence, loyalty, and even affection toward the mechanic. The mechanic, too, had changed. He had learned lessons that no ordinary life could teach: patience, trust, empathy, and courage. He understood that true strength did not come from individual power alone, but from the bond between beings who respected and relied on each other. The dragon had taught him these lessons in ways that no human could. And in turn, he had given the dragon guidance, trust, and companionship. Together, they had become more than friends. They were partners, equals, and protectors of each other. In the town, one evening, as the sun set and painted the sky in shades of red and orange, the mechanic sat beside the dragon outside the workshop. He ran his hand along its rough scales, feeling the warmth of its body and the steady beat of its chest. "We've been through so much," he whispered. The dragon let out a low, contented rumble, resting its head near him. There was a quiet understanding between them, a bond that words could not fully express. They had faced danger, saved lives, and grown together in ways neither could have imagined. The mechanic thought about the journey they had shared, from the moment he had inherited the dragon, to the struggles of learning to care for it, to the extraordinary adventures and dangers they had faced together. He realized that this grumpy, ugly alien creature had brought meaning, excitement, and purpose into his life. It had transformed him from a simple mechanic living a quiet, lonely life into someone capable of courage, leadership, and extraordinary companionship. The dragon, too, seemed aware of the change. Its eyes, once filled with suspicion and grumpiness, now reflected trust, curiosity, and a deep connection with the mechanic. It had learned to follow his guidance, respond to his instructions, and even show small gestures of affection. The bond between them had grown into something extraordinary, a partnership that could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and create incredible outcomes. The townspeople began to recognize the full impact of the mechanic and the dragon. They spoke quietly about the rescues, the guidance, and the protection the dragon had provided. They marveled at how an alien creature, once feared and misunderstood, had become a hero. The mechanic felt a deep sense of pride, not in himself alone, but in what they had accomplished together. The dragon was no longer just a grumpy, ugly alien. It was a symbol of courage, loyalty, and the power of partnership. As weeks turned into months, the mechanic and the dragon continued to work together, exploring new ways to help the town, learn from each other, and grow stronger. The dragon's abilities continued to develop, guided by the mechanic's patience and understanding. Together, they faced small challenges, large dangers, and countless opportunities to learn. The mechanic realized that their journey was not about the past or even about immediate danger. It was about the ongoing growth, connection, and trust they shared. By the end of Part 6, the mechanic understood that his life had been completely transformed. He was no longer a lonely, struggling man living a simple life. He was a partner to a powerful, intelligent, and loyal creature who had taught him lessons about courage, trust, and empathy. The dragon, too, had grown, not just in strength and intelligence, but in trust, loyalty, and companionship. Together, they had faced extraordinary challenges, saved lives, and created a bond that could withstand anything. Looking out over the town, the mechanic felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The grumpy, ugly alien dragon that had once been a mysterious inheritance had become a friend, protector, and teacher. Their partnership had proven that even the most unexpected beginnings could lead to incredible outcomes when approached with patience, understanding, and courage. He smiled, feeling the warmth of the dragon beside him, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together stronger, wiser, and united in a bond that nothing could break. And in that moment, the mechanic realized the truth. Sometimes, the most extraordinary things in life come from the most unexpected places. A grumpy, ugly alien dragon had changed his life forever, and in doing so, had shown him the true meaning of trust, partnership, and courage. Their story was not just about survival, it was about transformation, growth, and the power of connection.